The first time anyone heard about the basement tenant, it was through a joke. The kind of joke people tell when something makes them uncomfortable but they don't want to admit it. Yeah, the old landlord laughed, tapping ash into a cracked ceramic tray. There is already someone living downstairs. Most people assumed he meant rats, mold, or maybe some forgotten pile of junk. Nobody imagined he was talking about something else entirely, something breathing, something that had apparently been there longer than any lease, longer than any tenant, maybe longer than the house itself. And by the time anyone understood what he meant, it was already too late. The house sat at the end of a narrow, dead end street, squeezed between two abandoned properties like it had been forgotten by the rest of the city. It was a tall Victorian style home with peeling green paint, wrapped wooden steps, and windows so dirty they reflected almost nothing. During the day, it looked sad. At night, it looked wrong. Not haunted in the theatrical sense. No glowing windows or thunder cracking overhead. It was worse than that. It looked occupied by something patient, the kind of place you would talk past quickly without understanding why your body has suddenly gone cold. And yet, for 26-year-old Daniel Mercer, the house looked like salvation. Cheaper rent in a city that was bleeding him dry, a place close to work, utilities included, no roommates. He didn't ask too many questions because people who are desperate rarely do. Daniel had just started over after a brutal breakup, a collapsed business idea, and 6 months of couch surfing between friends who were rapidly losing patience. By the time he found the listing online, he was down to his last few $100s. The photos were suspiciously low quality, but the price was impossible to ignore. Half the normal rate for that neighborhood. When he called, the landlord answered on the second ring with a voice like sandpaper. "You can move in tomorrow," he said before Daniel even finished introducing himself. That should have been red flag number one. But Daniel was exhausted, humiliated, and out of options. Sometimes bad decisions don't feel reckless in the moment. Sometimes they feel like relief. When he arrived, the landlord barely greeted him. He was a heavy set man in his 60s named Walter, with nicotine yellowed fingers and eyes that darted too much, as if he was constantly listening for something. He handed Daniel a brass key, a folded lease agreement, and one instruction delivered with uncomfortable seriousness: "Do not go into the basement after midnight." Daniel laughed, waiting for the punchline. None came. Walter simply stared at him with an expression so flat it was impossible to read. "There is plumbing issues," he added after a long silence, but it sounded improvised, like he would realize too late how insane the first statement had been. Daniel nodded, signed the papers, and told himself every old landlord was weird in their own special way. The few first days were almost disappointingly normal. The house creaked constantly, but old houses do that. The water pressure was terrible. The radiators hissed like angry snakes, and every room smelled faintly of wet cardboard. Still, Daniel felt lucky. He unpacked his things. He set up a cheap mattress in the upstairs bedroom and even texted a few friends photos of the place with sarcastic captions like, "If I disappear, start here." Nobody found that funny later. At night, though, something strange began to happen. Not dramatic, not immediately terrifying, just patterns. Tiny things. Around 12:17 a.m. every night there would be a sound from below, a dull metallic clank, followed by what sounded like slow footsteps on concrete. At the first, Daniel assumed it was pipes expanding or maybe some ancient heating system kicking on. But the rhythm was too deliberate. Four slow steps, pause, four more, pause, always the same cadence, always from directly beneath the kitchen floor. On the fourth night, curiosity got the better of him. He stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the basement door tucked beneath the staircase. It was painted white once, maybe decades ago, but now the paint had cracked into yellowing scales. A small brass log had been installed on the outside. That was strange enough. Why lock a basement from the upstairs? Daniel leaned closer. The footsteps stopped. Silence swallowed the room so completely that he became suddenly aware of his own breathing. Then came a sound so faint he almost convinced himself he imagined it. A soft knock from the other side of the door. He froze, not because of the knock itself, but because it came in response. Not random, not setting pipes or shifting wood. Something had heard him standing there. Something knew he was listening. Daniel stepped backward so fast he nearly slipped on the tile. His heart kicked violently against his ribs. 100 rational explanations rushed into his brain at all once, each one more desperate than the last. Maybe an animal, maybe water pressure, maybe an echo from another unit somehow bouncing through old pipes. But none of those explanations knocked back. He retreated upstairs, locked his bedroom doors, and stayed awake until sunrise with every light on. By morning, it all felt ridiculous again. Daylight has a way of humiliating fear. Daniel mentioned in casually to Walter that afternoon while paying his first week's rent, "Hey, I think there is might actually be something in the basement," he said with a nervous chuckle. Walter didn't laugh, he did not even look surprised. He simply stared at Daniel for a few seconds, too long before asking, "Did it knock once or twice?" The question landed like ice water. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "What?" Walter repeated himself slower this time. "Did it knock once or twice?" Daniel answered honestly. "Once." Walter nodded, visibly relieved in a way that made absolutely no sense. "Good," he muttered. "Then it doesn't know you yet." And with that, he turned around and walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone on the porch, suddenly no longer sure he had rented a cheap apartment or entered into some kind of agreement he did not understand. That night, Daniel tried staying somewhere else. He booked a budget motel 20 minutes away and told himself he was overreacting. He needed sleep, perspective, distance. But around 2:43 in the morning, he woke up to the sound of knocking. Soft, hollow. Three gentle taps, not on the motel door, not on the wall, on the underside of the bed frame beneath him. Daniel shot upright so fast he hit his head on the lamp. Silence followed. Then another three taps, slow, patient, directly below him. That was the moment something inside him shifted from unease to pure animal fear. Whatever was in the basement, it was no longer in the basement. Daniel didn't sleep for the rest of the night. He sat up upright in that cheap motel bed, every muscle locked, staring at the floral wallpaper as if it might suddenly peel open and reveal a face watching him from inside the walls. He told himself over and over that exhaustion was distorting his senses. Stress, lack of sleep, isolation, those things can make ordinary sounds feel sinister. But deep down, he already knew this was not stress. Stress does not follow you to another building. Stress does not knock you from beneath a bed in a room you checked twice before lying down. When morning finally bled through the curtains, Daniel left without showering, without coffee, barely remembering to grab his backpack. He drove straight back to the house, not because he wanted answers, but because all his things were still there. And for some reason far more disturbing, part of him felt pulled back. The street looked normal in daylight, almost offensively so. A mailman walked past, humming to himself. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked behind a fence. A woman watered dead flowers on her porch as if nothing about this neighborhood was deeply wrong. Daniel packed across the street and stared at the house through his windshields for nearly 10 minutes. He kept expecting to see movements in one of the upstairs window, a curtain shift, a silhouette, some confrontation that he was not the only things aware of what was happening. But the house just sat there in complete stillness, like an animal conserving energy. Finally, forcing himself out of the car, he crossed the street and climbed the porch steps with a strange sense of ceremony, as though he were voluntarily entering some place scared and hostile. Inside the air, he felt colder than it should have. Normally, not cold, unnaturally absent of warmth, as if the house itself rejected heat. Daniel set his bag on the kitchen counter and immediately noticed something out of place. His coffee mug was gone. It had been sitting beside the sink when he left the previous evening. Now it was nowhere in sight. At first, he assumed he would absent mindedly moved it. But after checking every cabinet, every countertop, even the trash can, it was simply missing. An absurd detail, but somehow deeply unsettling. Then he saw it on the floor directly in front of the basement door. His mug placed upside down with impossible precision, scented like an offering. Daniel stopped breathing for a second. He knew he had not left it there. Every instinct scrambled at him to leave immediately. Instead of, he crouched slowly and reached for the mug. The ceramic was warm, not room temperature, not recently touched by sunlight or a radiator, warm like it had just been held. Daniel dropped it instantly. It shattered across the tile with a violent crack that echoed through the kitchen. For one suspended second, nothing happened. Then came the sound, not knocking this time, scratching. Long, deliberate, dragging sounds from the other side of the basement door, as if something with nails or something imitating nails was tracing patterns against the wood. Daniel backed away so fast he slammed into the refrigerator. The scratching continued, steady and thoughtful, not frantic, not aggressive, curious. He called Walter 37 times. No answer. He texted him, voice messaged him, even drove to the address listed on the lease agreement only to discover it was an empty lot fenced off for demolition. That was when Daniel realized something he should have checked much earlier. None of this was normal enough to have a paper trail. It staged Walter's name online. Nothing useful. No property records. No business registration. No social media. It was like the man existed only in the exact moments required to collect rent and issues warning. By late afternoon, Daniel had crossed from frightened into obsessed. Fear wants escape, obsession wants explanation, and explanation in horror stories is usually the first truly fatal mistake. He started with the neighbors. Most ignored him or pretended not to hear when he knocked. One elderly woman across the street cracked her door just wide enough to reveal one eye and half a mouth. When Daniel asked about the house, her expression changed immediately. Not confusion, not curiosity, but recognition. You rented it? she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. The woman studied him for a moment as if calculating how much truth his face could survive. You should leave before it learns your schedule, she said. Then she shut the door. No elaboration, no sympathy, just a statement delivered with the practical tone of someone advising you to carry an umbrella. Eventually, one person talked. A machine named, a mechanic named Louis who had lived on the block since childhood. He invited Daniel into his garage, glanced nervously toward the street, and told him a story so bizarre it initially sounded like neighborhood folklore. According to Louis, tenants had been cycling through that house for decades, never staying more than a few weeks, sometimes days, always leaving suddenly, usually abandoning belongings. The official explanations was always the same: personal emergency, family issue, job relocation, but nobody believed that. Too consistent, too rehearsed. You ever see anyone move out? Louis asked. Daniel shook his head. Louis nodded grimly. Exactly. Daniel pressed him harder. What is the basement? Louis hesitated for a long time. I don't know, he admitted. But when I was 12, my friends dared me to break in there. His voice dropped lower. We got as far as the kitchen before hearing someone downstairs call one of us by name. Daniel felt his throat tighten. How would it know? Louis gave a weak, humorless laugh. That's what we asked to. He rolled up his sleeve and revealed a faded scar running from twist to elbow, pale and gadget like melted wax. My friend's Mark opened the basement door 1 inch. That's all. 1 inch. He disappeared 2 months later. Daniel stared at the scar, unsure which detail was worse, the wound or how casually Louis mentioned disappearance as though it had become just another neighborhood fact. By sunset, Daniel had made a decision so irrational it could only have been fueled by terror and lack of sleep. He was going into the basement not because he was brave, not because he thought he could solve anything, but because uncertainty had become worse than fear. The human mind can survive almost anything except sustained ambiguity. He bought a flashlight, a crowbar, duct tape, and two portable battery lamps from a hardware store, like those items could somehow create control. Back at the house, he spent an hour pacing the kitchen, staring at the basement door while rehearsing explanations for what he might find. Squitters, hidden room, drug stash, some elaborate prank, anything finite, anything physical. At exactly 11:58 p.m., Daniel placed one lamp on the counter, one near the staircase, and one poisoned and crowbar under the basement lock. His hands were trembling so badly he had to stop twice just to breathe steady enough to apply pressure. The brass lock snapped with less effort than expected, clattering into the floor. Immediately, the temperature in the room dropped hard enough to fog his breath. Daniel whispered a curse under his breath and stared at the now unlocked door. Nothing happened. Not scratching, no footstep, just silence, so complete it felt engineered. He wrapped his fingers around the handle, and his phone buzzed. Daniel nearly screamed. He fumbled it from his pocket and stared at the screen. Unknown number, one new voicemail, timestamps, 5 seconds ago. He had no memory of hearing the phone. With number fingers, he opened the message. Static filled the speaker for 3 long seconds. Then came a voice, his own voice, calm, barely above a whisper. Don't open it, it said. The message ended. Daniel stood frozen, phone in one hand. basement handle in the other, while every rational parts of his brain collapsed like wet papers. Because this was no longer about a strange tenant, a weird landlord, or neighborhood rumors. Something had crossed a line. Something was not just inside the house, it was inside the sequence of events themselves. And still, against every survival instinct left in his body, Daniel turned the handle. The basement door opened with a sound so small it somehow felt louder than anything Daniel had heard all week. Just a soft release of sloven wood separating from its frame. No dramatic creak, no cinematic groan. That almost made it worse. It opened too easily, like something on the other side had already been waiting with its hand on the opposite knob. A wave of air rolled upward immediately, cold, stale, and carrying a smell Daniel could not possess at first. Not rot, not mold, something older, like wet earth sealed inside a lock trunk for decades. He angled the flashlight downward. Wooden stairs disappeared into darkness, so thick it seemed to absorb the beam instead of reflecting it. The light touched maybe 5 steps before vanishing into black. Daniel should have closed the door. That was the last clean exit point. The final moment where the story could still end with him driving away, abandoning furniture, blocking numbers, and spending the rest of his life trying not to think about old houses. Instead, he stepped onto the first stair. The wood groaned softly beneath his weight. Then another step, then another. Each movement felt oddly rehearsed, as though his body was no longer improvising but following choreography written long before he arrived. Halfway down, he noticed something deeply wrong with the walls. They weren't unfinished concrete like he expected. They were covered in wallpaper, faded floral wallpaper, peeling in strips, yellowed with age. Someone had once tried to make this basement comfortable. At the bottom, the flashlight finally revealed the room. Now, it was not a basement. It was not at all a basement, or at least not anymore. Spread before him was a fully furnished living space, impossibly intact despite the decay above. A small sitting area, a plaid armchair, a lamp with a beige shade, a narrow bookshelf, famed painting hanging crookedly on wallpaper walls, a single bed tucked neatly into the far corner. It looked like an apartment assembled by someone working entirely from the memory, getting every detail almost but not quite correct. The proportion felt stably off. The furniture was slightly too small, too low, like a replica built by something that understood the concept of human living, but not the exact mathematics of comfort. Daniel slowly turned in a full circle, flashlight trembling through the room. On the coffee table sat a ceramic mug, his mug.